This inside line is all about assembling a beadlock wheel. I'm going to show you how to do it easily at home, why it's important to take your time, and just where this new 37-inch tall tire and beadlock is going to land. Now let's get into how a beadlock works. Now it's fairly simple design. The idea here for most aftermarket beadlocks that you'll find is they'll use an external mounting ring, and what's going to happen is it's going to sandwich the outside bead of the tire between here. Now using, in this case, 24 bolts to actually bolt this external ring to the wheelbase, you're going to lock in that external bead. This means when you're off-road at single-digit pressure, you don't have to worry about the bead bundle coming apart from the wheel. Now this wheel might look a little strange to you in the fact that it actually has two shoulders here for a conventional bead bundle. That's because this is the American Expedition Vehicles Borah wheel. Now this is sort of their dual sport wheel. What makes it unique is that yes, it can be run as a conventional wheel, so you can take it to any tire and wheel shop. They'll toss it on, balance it just like you would a factory wheel. In my case, I'm going to run it as a beadlock, and the way they engineered this is they did this step here so you can easily say, you know what, I want to move to a beadlock and actually have my tire mounted on the outside, the external bead. And that's all you have to do. You go from their decorative ring to their actual beadlock ring, and bam, you can upgrade to a beadlock if you ever see fit. Now the very first thing I highly recommend you doing is getting your valve stems and putting them in the wheel. Now this is going to require a valve stem puller. You can pick up one of these from Amazon for just about $7. I'll put a link in the description below so you can find out the one that I'm using. Now if you are running a TPMS or you plan on running TPMS, this is the time to go ahead and do that. This is just a standard short valve stem. It's going to stay nice and recessed and protected in here, so that's all I'm using. To do it, you just put it through the back side. Now what I like to do, instead of trying to spin the actual tool, is I'll actually thread the valve stem into the tool. It makes it a little bit easier. This one has a little bit of rubber on it to keep it from scratching up the wheel. I still like to be a little bit more cautious about it and just pop it right through. Two things to consider before installing your tire. Number one, does it have a unique sidewall on each side? Now something like this 37 by 1250 Nitto Trail Grappler absolutely does. And even though you can pick whichever sidewall out that you like, I'm going to go with the one that actually has the little marker here that's going to allow me to line up this with my valve stem. And that's what that's for. It's to guide the installer to say, hey, put this where the valve stem is, and that's going to give you what the manufacturer recommends is the best starting point for the tire and wheel position before it gets onto the balancer. Now, I don't have a balancer here, so I want to get sort of my best foot forward to hopefully maybe not even have to get these things balanced. But if I do, and I take it in to get it balanced, at least the balancer will see that, hey, he did this the right way, got this lined up with the valve stem, so hopefully it won't take as much weight to get these things riding smooth. Okay, now for the fun part. You want to make sure you use a ton of lube. Get it on the wheel, get it all over the tire. Make sure you have got your outside mark so you know which is the outer sidewall that you want running out. And what I like to do is put the wheel on a soft surface. This is a little pad. If you have something, you can bring it up a little bit more. It helps. And I put the tire on the wheel. I'm not a big fan of doing it the other way. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it's a little tough to do these. I've done a couple of these already this morning, and it definitely puts a little workout onto you, but it's really not that bad if you can use enough lube. I'm gonna fast forward this so it looks like I did it really quickly. Now the next big thing we got to do here is you'll get up. Now I'm using a 5-gallon bucket just to get the tire off of the floor so it's not putting any pressure on the backside. Now I like to use a few things. A couple trim tools and a dead blow hammer. My goal here is I need to get the bead pushed down evenly all the way around the wheel. It doesn't take much to put these back here. These are really inexpensive trim tools. I'm sure someone is going to comment that there's a better way to do this. This is just how I do it. If you can find a different way, it's not going to mess up the finish of the wheel, go for it. Depending on the wheel manufacturer, they might have a different indentation or something to let you know where this ring bolts up. AEV just says to line it up with the warning label, so that's what I'm going to do. Kind of look in here and see just about where that needs to be. That looks right. Now at this point, you see I've got gloves on, and what I have in front of me is very important. This silver box tube of goo is, man, it goes everywhere. But you need it. It's anti-seize. And literally all 24 bolts are going to get a nice helping of anti-seize. And the idea behind it is to make sure that these bolts do not seize up inside of the wheel at any point. That way, if I do ever damage the tire, or I need to replace a tire, or I need to replace the beadlock ring, I can get these things out. It's not going to be a nightmare. I'm not going to make you sit there and watch me lube all of the bolts, but it's good to know this is a very important step that you don't want to skip. Now AEV offers you some pretty good guidance and tips on how to get this ring to make sure that it's nice and flat in terms of the direction of the bolts. Now a lot of guys you will see will run it this way. They'll start this bolt and kind of work their way around. I like to go sort of cross bolt, so I'll do like a cross pattern and just kind of work my way around the wheel that way. It's slow going any way you look at it. I like to do it with a small 3/8 hand ratchet first to make sure that everything, even though I started all of these by hand, this just makes sure that these things, I'm not putting too much torque on them and I don't have an issue with the insert or anything like that. Once you get them sort of all kind of snug to where they're not putting a ton of pressure on this ring, but they're down, I like to move to the torque wrench and just move up in increments. I'll go ahead and run like a 10, and then I'll go to maybe 18 pound-feet, and ultimately AEV recommends 24. So that'll be the last sort of run that I do, and it takes time. You're just gonna have to sit there and kind of keep going after it. Don't rush through it. Don't use air tools, don't use power tools, just do it by hand, because if you mess up just one of these, it's going to be a problem. So take the manufacturer's recommendation, do this by hand. It's going to be a slow process, but it's worth it in the long run to make sure you got it done right. And at this point, we are ready for air. Now, to do this, you don't really need a high volume compressor. You don't have to pull out the valve core. Just hook up your air, wait for the outside bead to pop in, and go. I'm going to put this thing up to 30 psi. That'll probably end up being around street pressure anyhow. So let's go ahead and get this thing done, and bam, we can just yeah, keep on going. So now that I've showed you how to assemble a beadlock wheel, I want to talk a little bit about why I picked the AEV Borah Dual Sport wheel. Now, as you can see, it's no longer on the bucket. It's now underneath my 2020 Jeep Gladiator Rubicon. Yes, 37's a no lift. That'll be a video for a different day. But importantly, I want to kind of highlight some of the features that made this beadlock and this wheel very important to me. Now, for starters, AEV does a good job of allowing you to reuse the stock lug nuts. It's a hub-centric wheel. I mean, it is about as Gladiator specific as it gets. Beyond that, this 33-pound wheel has 5.71 inches of backspacing. That means I'm going to reduce the scrub radius significantly over a wheel that, let's say, had 3.5 inches of backspacing. The idea here is to sort of preserve as much of the factory geometry as you can. You know, every time you move this tire and wheel package outside of where the factory intended, you're putting more stress on the ball joints, the wheel bearings, the steering, and it's ultimately going to cause more wear, and it's going to make the steering much heavier. This is going to help preserve that. I've done a video kind of going into this more in the past. I'll link it up here. But that's why I kind of went with this wheel. It's really a good Gladiator specific wheel. Works well on these platforms. It's got plus 25 millimeters of offset. So yes, it sticks out just a touch, but I'll be going over that more later. Now, as you can see, it's configured. It has the onyx painted ring. That matches very well with the paint on this granite Gladiator. Yes, this is going to be the part that gets torn up off-road. No big deal. I can just touch it up. Now, AEV specs this out as a 17 by 8.5. Now, that's in the conventional non-beadlock configuration. When you run it like a beadlock, you're going to be at a 17 by 9 roughly, which is perfectly fine for this 37 by 1250. You're well within spec, so there's not an issue there. We've got some cool stuff coming to this, a lot of neat videos coming to the channel. Please comment, like, let us know how we're doing. If you got any questions, you can always find me at Ali Mansour Editor. And until next time, we'll see you guys on the trail.